I felt my world shatter when Liam dropped the bomb. My son, my only boy, sat there at my kitchen table and told me he was changing his last name, our name, the one his father and I gave him, the one that held our family together through every struggle. He was tossing it aside like it meant nothing, because his wife Martha thought it'd be better for their business brand. My stomach churned like I'd been hit with a brick. I couldn't breathe right. How could he do this to us? Martha just sat there, arms crossed with this smug little smirk like she'd already won. I wanted to scream, to grab him by the shoulders and shake some sense into him, to make him see he was throwing away who he was. But all I could do was stare, my heart hammering, as the truth sank in. My son was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. Hello, I'm Janice, 57 years old. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. This all started at a family dinner I'd been planning for weeks. Liam and Martha didn't come over much anymore, and I was desperate to see my son. He's my only kid, and ever since his dad passed when he was 10, it's been me and him against the world. I worked double shifts at the diner, saved every penny to give him a good life, and always told him our name Harris meant something. It was our pride, our roots. When he met Martha in college, I was over the moon. She was sharp-driven, the kind of woman I thought would lift him up. They got married 3 years ago, and I figured we'd all be one big family. But then this name thing happened, and it ripped everything apart. I'd spent all day cooking for that dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie from scratch. I wanted it to be perfect because I could feel Liam drifting. He used to call me every Sunday, but now I'd get a quick text if I was lucky. Martha always had an excuse: work, travel, their new coffee business. They'd opened this place called Bean and Branch, a fancy roastery that was their whole world. I was proud of them, don't get me wrong, but I missed my boy. So, when they said they'd come over, I thought maybe we could get back to how things used to be. We were eating, laughing a little, and I was starting to relax. Then Martha leaned forward, her wine glass in hand, and said, "We've got something big to talk about for the business." Her voice was smooth like she'd practiced it. Liam looked down at his plate, poking at his food. I nodded, thinking she was going to tell me about a new coffee blend, or maybe a bigger shop. But then she hit me with it. "We think Liam should change his last name to mine. It'll make our brand stronger. Bean and Branch with Caldwell just sounds better than Harris." I stopped cold. My fork was halfway to my mouth, and I just held it there staring at her. I looked at Liam, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was some weird joke. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. Martha kept talking all businesslike. "Caldwell has a clean, modern vibe. It's marketable. Harris, it's just not the same." She shrugged, like our name was some old t-shirt you'd toss out. I put my fork down slow, trying to keep my cool. "Liam, you're okay with this?" I asked, my voice tight. He finally looked up, his eyes guilty but stubborn. "Ma, it's just a name. It's for the business. It doesn't change anything." But the way he said it, like he was trying to convince himself, made my chest hurt. I turned to Martha. "You're saying my name? Our family name has no value." I didn't mean to snap, but it came out sharp. Martha didn't even blink. She leaned back, that half smile still on her face. "Janice, it's not personal. Caldwell just works better for what we're building. That's all. That's all. Like our family was nothing. Like everything I'd done for Liam, working late nights, scraping, by teaching him who we were meant zero." I stood up my chair, scraping loud against the floor. "This isn't about your damn business. This is about family. Our family. You're asking my son to throw away his identity for a coffee shop." My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. Liam reached out. "Ma, please," but I cut him off. "No, Liam. You're letting her erase who you are." Martha rolled her eyes, and that's when I lost it. "Don't you dare sit in my house and act like my family's worthless." I was yelling now, my hands clenched. Liam stood trying to calm things down, but Martha just sipped her wine, cool as ever. "Janice, you're overreacting. It's a practical decision." I wanted to throw something to make her feel what I was feeling, but I just pointed at the door. "Get out. Both of you." Liam looked torn, but Martha grabbed her purse and walked out without a word. Liam followed, mumbling, "I'll call you Ma." The door shut, and I was alone with a table full of cold food. I sat there for hours, staring at the plates, replaying every word. Martha's voice kept echoing, "Caldwell works better." It wasn't just about the name. It was like she was saying our whole family was irrelevant. I thought Liam would call the next day, say he'd thought it over, that he wasn't going through with it. But he didn't. A week later, I got a text. "Ma, I'm doing it. I'm changing my name to Caldwell. I hope you can understand." Understand. I felt like he'd ripped my heart out. I tried talking to him. I called, left voicemails, sent texts. I told him about his dad, how he'd cried when we named him Liam Harris, how proud he was to pass on our name. I told him about his great-grandparents who'd come over with nothing and built a life all under the Harris name. But every time Liam would say, "It's just a name, Ma. It's not a big deal." And every time it cut deeper. Martha had gotten to him, twisted his head around until he thought our family was nothing compared to her big plans. I couldn't sleep right after that. I'd lie in bed wondering what I'd done wrong. Was I too hard on him growing up? Not hard enough? Did I miss something? I started looking into Martha's family, trying to figure out why her name was such a big deal. I found out the Caldwells were loaded old money, with a huge estate upstate and businesses all over. They'd bankrolled Bean and Branch, given Martha a leg up that Liam and I could never have matched. It hit me. This wasn't just about branding. It was about control. Martha wanted Liam to be part of her world, not mine. I started calling family, friends, anyone who'd listen. My sister Carol was furious. "He's throwing away everything you gave him," she said. I reached out to Liam's old high school coach, Mike, who'd been close to him. Mike was shocked, but said, "He's a grown man, Janice. I don't know how to fix this." Nobody did. I felt like I was screaming into a void. Meanwhile, Martha was posting online pictures of her and Liam at the coffee shop, all smiles with Caldwell on the new logo. Every post was like a slap. Then the letter came. It was from Liam, all official, with his new name, Liam Caldwell. Inside was the court document, his signature at the bottom, making it real. I sat on my couch, holding that paper, feeling like my whole world was crumbling. I thought about all the times I'd written his name on his first backpack, on birthday cards, on the checks for his college books. Now it was gone, replaced by hers. I couldn't just sit there. I went to my safe, pulled out his original birth certificate, the one with Liam Michael Harris in bold letters. I held it close, like it could bring him back. Then I grabbed a pen and wrote a note. I raised a son, not a brand. I stuffed it in an envelope and mailed it to their apartment. I didn't know if he'd even open it, but I had to do something. After that, Liam stopped calling. Weeks went by and I got nothing. Not a text, not a word. I'd check my phone every hour, hoping, but it was always empty. Martha kept posting more pictures, more Caldwell branding. I felt like I was losing him for good. I started going to their coffee shop, not to make a scene, but just to see him. I'd order a latte, sit in the back, and watch him work. He looked okay, maybe even happy, but every time he saw me, his face would change, like he was guilty or embarrassed. Once he came over and said, "Ma, you don't have to keep coming here." I wanted to tell him I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for him, to remind him who he was. But I just nodded and left. I wasn't ready to give up, though. I started talking to Liam's friends, trying to get them to reach out to him. Most of them were shocked about the name change, but they didn't know how to help. One friend, Tom, was different. He called me after a night out with Liam and said, "Janice, something's off. He's not himself. Martha's running the show, and he's just going along." Tom said he'd overheard Martha talking about her family's plans, how they wanted Liam to fully commit to the Caldwell name like it was some kind of initiation. It made my skin crawl. This wasn't about love or business. It was about owning my son. I tried confronting Liam one more time. I showed up at the coffee shop when Martha wasn't around and caught him cleaning the espresso machine. "Liam, can we talk?" I asked. He sighed, but nodded. We sat at a table, and I went for it. "Do you even want this? The name changed, the business, all of it. Or is this just what Martha wants?" He looked tired, his shoulders slumped. "Ma, it's my life now." I made a choice. But his voice wasn't convincing. He pushed harder. "You're my son. You're a Harris. Don't let her take that from you." He shook his head, standing up. "I gotta get back to work." He walked away, and I felt like I'd lost another piece of him. Then came the first big twist. Tom called me late one night, sounding nervous. "Janice, I heard something you need to know." He'd been at a party with Liam and Martha, and he overheard her talking to her dad, Richard Caldwell. They weren't just pushing the name change. They were pressuring Liam to sign over part of the business to them. Tom said Richard called Liam a good investment, but said he needed to cut ties with me to prove his loyalty. It wasn't about branding at all. It was about control, pure and simple. I was furious, but I was also scared. Martha wasn't just taking Liam's name, she was taking his whole future. I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I went to the coffee shop the next day, ready to confront them both, but only Martha was there. She saw me coming and walked over her face like stone. "Janice, you need to stop meddling." Liam's made his decision. Let him go. I stepped closer, my voice low. "You don't get to tell me how to love my son. And you sure as hell don't get to steal him." She laughed sharp and cold. "You're pathetic. He's a Caldwell now. Deal with it." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my hands shaking with rage. That night, I sat down and wrote Liam another letter. I didn't yell or beg. I just told him I loved him, that I'd always be his mom, no matter what name he used. I told him about the birth certificate, how it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof of who he was, where he came from. I mailed it, not expecting an answer, but hoping he'd read it, and maybe, just maybe, start to question things. I didn't know it then, but that letter was the first step in a fight I wasn't gonna lose. I was done sitting around waiting for Liam to snap out of it. After that fight, with Martha and Tom's bombshell about her family's plans, I knew I had to fight back, not with tears or shouting matches, but with something real. My son was slipping away, and I wasn't gonna let Martha and her rich family take him without a fight. The letter I sent him was just the start. I could feel the Caldwells closing in, trying to erase me from his life, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I needed to move fast, dig deeper, and find a way to show Liam what was really going on before he was too far gone. I started with Tom, who'd become my eyes and ears. He was Liam's best friend from college, loyal but worried, and he'd seen things I couldn't. We met at a diner a few days after his call away from the coffee shop, where Martha might spot us. Tom looked nervous, sipping his coffee like he was afraid someone was listening. He told me Liam was acting strange, quiet, stressed, not the guy who used to crack jokes and plan camping trips. "He's working nonstop at Bean and Branch," Tom said, leaning forward. "Martha's got him handling the day-to-day stuff, while she's off with her dad, meeting investors, making big calls. He barely talks about the business anymore, just does what she says." I asked about the name change, hoping Liam might have said something. Tom shook his head. "He dodged it. But I can tell it's eating at him, Janice." That gave me a spark of hope, but it also made me madder. If Liam was miserable, why was he letting Martha run his life? Why wasn't he pushing back? I needed to know more about the Caldwells and what they were really after. I wasn't some private investigator, but I had a laptop and a lot of late nights. I started searching online, diving into public records, news, articles, anything I could find. The Caldwells weren't just wealthy, they were like a machine. Martha's dad, Richard Caldwell, owned half a dozen companies, real estate restaurants, even a tech startup. Every one of his kids, including Martha, had a piece of the pie, and they all carried the Caldwell name like it was a badge of honor. It was more than a family. It was a brand, and they expected Liam to fall in line. I found a blog post about a guy who'd married Richard's niece and changed his name to Caldwell. A year later, he'd handed over his small business to the family and was out of the picture, divorced and broke. The pattern was clear. The Caldwells didn't just want your name, they wanted everything you had. I printed the post and started a folder, adding notes about Richard's businesses. Martha's role, anything that might help. It wasn't much, but it felt like I was building something, a way to fight back. I also reached out to Liam's old friends, hoping they could help me get through to him. I called Sarah, who'd known him since high school, and invited her over with a few others for what I called a catch-up night. Only 3 showed up, but they all said the same thing. Liam wasn't himself. Sarah told me she'd tried inviting him to her birthday a month ago, but Martha shut it down, saying they were swamped with work. Sarah frowned, stirring her tea. "Janice, he's not happy. He's just stuck like he's trying to keep up with her." Another friend, Nate, said Liam used to text him about random stuff, movies, games, but now all he got were one-word replies. It was like Martha had him on a leash. Hearing that over and over lit something in me. I wasn't gonna let my son disappear into her world. I started going to Bean and Branch, more often, not to make a scene, but to be near him. I'd wait until Martha was in the back or out with clients, then walk up to the counter and talk to Liam. "Hey kid," I'd say, keeping it light. "How's the coffee game treating you?" He'd give a small smile, but it was forced, like he was putting on a show. I'd ask about his day, the new roasts, anything to keep him talking. Sometimes he'd loosen up. Tell me about a customer who'd loved his latest blend. Other times, he'd just nod and say, "It's fine, Ma." Those days hurt the most. He was right there but so far away. One afternoon, I caught him alone and decided to push a little. He was wiping down the counter looking exhausted. "Liam, are you happy with all this? The name, change the business, everything." He stopped, his hand gripping the rag. For a second, I thought he might open up, tell me he was trapped. But then he straightened up and said, "It's what I want, Ma. Can we not do this?" His voice was flat, like he'd said it 100 times. I wanted to grab him, make him look at me, but I just nodded and left. I wasn't giving up, but I needed a new plan. That's when I decided to face Martha head on. It was a risk. She'd already shown she didn't give a damn about me, but I had to try. I waited for a quiet afternoon at the coffee shop when Liam was out making a delivery. Martha was behind the counter, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. I walked up, my heart pounding, and said, "We need to talk. Now." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. We sat at a corner table, and I didn't hold back. "Why are you doing this to Liam? Why the name change? Why are you pulling him away from me?" My voice was steady, but I was burning inside. Martha leaned back, crossing her arms. "Janice, this isn't about you. It's about what's best for us." Liam agreed to the name change because he sees the bigger picture. "You're making it personal when it's just business." Her tone was so calm, like she was talking to a kid, throwing a tantrum. I clenched my fists under the table. "It is personal. You're asking him to throw away who he is. You're asking him to throw away me." She sighed like I was exhausting her. "He's not throwing you away. He's building something. If you can't support that, maybe you're the one pushing him out." That hit me like a slap, but I didn't let her see it. I leaned forward, my voice low. "I know about your family, Martha. I know how they work. You're not branding a coffee shop, you're branding my son." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she stood up and said, "We're done here. Liam's made his choice. Accept it." She walked back to the counter, leaving me sitting there, my hands shaking with anger. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she'd never take him, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. Not yet. That night I couldn't sleep. Martha's words kept playing in my head. Accept it. Like I was supposed to just roll over and let her win. I started thinking about what I could really do to get Liam back. I called my friend Karen, who's a lawyer, and told her everything. She listened for an hour, letting me rant, then got serious. "Janice, Liam's an adult. He signed the papers. There's no legal angle here, unless you can prove he was coerced, and that's a high bar." I asked about the business, the stuff Tom overheard about the Caldwells wanting control. Karen said I'd need evidence, contracts, emails, something solid. I didn't have that, but I wasn't stopping. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every detail, every conversation with Liam, every run-in with Martha, every tip from Tom. I wasn't sure how it'd help, but it made me feel like I was doing something. I also kept reaching out to Liam, trying new ways to connect. I'd send him old photos, him as a kid at the beach, him and his dad fishing, our family at Christmas. I'd add short notes. "Found this in a box. Remember that summer I didn't bring up the name change, just tried to remind him of us, of who he was before Martha." Then Tom called with something big. It was late, and he sounded rattled. "Janice, I was at a Caldwell event with Liam, and I heard Martha's dad talking to some guy, an investor, I think. He said Richard was bragging about securing Liam's share of Bean and Branch through a contract tied to the name change. Tom didn't have the contract, but he'd recorded a snippet on his phone. It wasn't crystal clear, just Richard saying, 'The kid's locked in now. Caldwell name. Caldwell rules.' But it was enough to make my heart race. This was proof, or at least a start. I met Tom the next morning, and he sent me the recording. I listened to it over and over, each time feeling angrier. The Caldwells weren't just after Liam's name, they were after his whole life. I called Karen and played it for her. She was cautious, but said it could help if I found more like the actual contract. I didn't know how to get that, but I had an idea. Liam's old college roommate Jake worked in finance and knew people. I called him, explained everything, and asked if he could poke around the Caldwell's business dealings. He was hesitant, didn't want to get in trouble, but said he'd try as long as it was quiet. While I waited for Jake, I kept showing up at the coffee shop. One day, Liam looked rough, dark circles under his eyes, moving slow. I couldn't help it, I asked. "You okay, kid? You look beat." He sighed, rubbing his face. "It's just a lot, Ma. The shop, the investors, all of it. For the first time, he sounded like my son, not Martha's puppet. I took a chance. If it's too much, you can step back. You don't have to do this. He shook his head, but he didn't snap at me. That was something. I also started watching Martha closer. I'd drive by the shop at night, not proud of it, but desperate to know what she was up to. I'd see her in meetings with men in suits, always smiling, always in control. One night, I saw her with her dad's lawyer again. The same guy from before. They were outside, talking under the shop's awning, and she handed him another folder. I couldn't hear them, but the way she stood, confident, almost smug, made my stomach twist. I snapped a photo with my phone, time-stamped it, and added it to my notebook. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt important. Then Jake called. He'd found something, a draft contract between Liam and the Caldwells, leaked by a friend at a law firm. It wasn't signed yet, but it was bad. The name change was tied to a clause that gave the Caldwells control of Bean and Branch if the business didn't hit certain targets. If Liam failed, he'd lose everything, but the Caldwells would still own it. Jake emailed me the file, and I read it until I couldn't see straight. This wasn't a partnership, it was a setup. I wanted to run to Liam, show him the contract, and make him see the truth. But I knew he wasn't ready. He was still too caught up in Martha's world, too convinced this was his future. I needed more evidence. Something he couldn't ignore. I called Tom and Karen, and we met at my house to plan. Tom was ready to confront Liam himself, but Karen said we needed to be smart. This contract's a start, but we need proof of intent, emails, texts, anything showing they lied to him. I nodded, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but I was all in. I kept up my visits to the coffee shop, watching for any chance to talk to Liam. I'd bring him cookies, tell him I was just passing by. He'd smile, but his smiles were strained. I could see the weight on him, the long hours, the pressure, Martha's control. One day, he let something slip. I'd asked about a new coffee blend, and he said, "It's not even my idea. Martha's dad picked it." His voice was bitter, and he caught himself changing the subject. But it was enough to keep me going. My son was still in there, and I was going to fight to get him back. I was getting closer to the truth, and it felt like a fire under me. Jake's contract was a bombshell proof. The Caldwells were setting Liam up to lose everything. But it wasn't enough to just have it. I needed to show Liam what Martha and her family were really doing, and I needed him to believe me. He was still caught in their web, working long hours at Bean and Branch, following Martha's orders, thinking this was his dream. I knew he was slipping, though little cracks were showing, and I had to keep pushing, keep gathering evidence, keep fighting to get my son back before they locked him in for good. Jake's call came a week after he sent the contract. His voice was low, like he was afraid someone might overhear. "Janice, I got more. It's not good." He dug deeper, calling in favors from a contact at a law firm that worked with the Caldwells. They'd leaked an email chain between Martha and her dad Richard, talking about Liam and the business. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was close. The emails mentioned the name change as a symbolic step to secure Liam's commitment, and hinted at a meeting to finalize terms after he'd legally become a Caldwell. Jake couldn't get the full chain. His contact was nervous about getting caught, but he sent me what he had. I read it over and over, my heart pounding. This was proof they'd planned to trap him from the start. I added the emails to my folder, along with the contract, and Tom's recording of Richard at the party. It was starting to look like a real case, but I needed more to convince Liam. He wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. I tried talking to him at the coffee shop, but he'd shut me down, saying he'd made his choice. Still, I could see the strain in him. The way he moved slower, looked tired, like the weight of Martha's world was crushing him. I kept showing up at Bean and Branch, not to argue, but to be there to remind him I wasn't going anywhere. I'd order a coffee, sit in the corner, and watch him work. Sometimes he'd glance over, and I'd smile, hoping he'd feel me rooting for him. One day, I caught him alone, wiping down tables after closing. I walked up, keeping it light. "Long day, kid." He nodded, not looking at me. "Yeah, ma. Always is." I took a chance. "You ever think about slowing down? Maybe taking a break?" He paused, his rag still on the table. For a second, I thought he might say something real, but then he shrugged. "Can't. Too much to do." His voice was flat, but there was something underneath, doubt. "Maybe." I didn't push, just said, "I'm here if you need me." He nodded, and I left feeling like I'd planted a seed. I kept digging, focusing on Martha now. I'd drive by the shop at night, not proud of it, but desperate to know what she was up to. I'd see her in meetings with men in suits, always smiling, always in control. One night, I saw her with her dad's lawyer again. The same guy from before. They were outside talking under the shop's awning, and she handed him another folder. I couldn't hear them, but the way she stood confident, almost smug, made my stomach twist. I snapped a photo with my phone, added it to my notebook, and wrote down every detail: the time, the date, the lawyer's name. It wasn't much, but it was something. I also kept reaching out to Liam, trying to rebuild what we had. I'd text him old stories. Funny stuff, like the time he tried to cook pancakes and set off the smoke alarm. I'd sent photos of him as a kid, hoping to jog his memory of who he was. He started replying. Not much, just a haha, or I remember that. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to keep me going. Then out of nowhere, he called me one evening. "Ma, can we meet? Just us." My heart jumped. I said yes, before he could change his mind. We met at a diner across town, far from the coffee shop, and Martha's influence. When I saw him, he looked worse than ever, pale eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. We ordered coffee, and I let him talk. He told me about Bean and Branch, how it was growing, but stressful, how the investors were pushing for more. He didn't mention the name change, and I didn't bring it up. Instead, I asked, "Are you happy, Liam?" "Really?" He stared at his mug, his fingers tapping the handle. "I don't know, Ma. I thought this was it, but it's hard." That was the first crack I'd seen in months. I didn't push too hard. I just said, "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. No matter what." He nodded, and when we left, he hugged me quick, but real. It was the first time he'd done that since the name change, and it felt like a lifeline. I went home and cried, not from sadness, but from hope. My son was still in there, and I was going to fight like hell to get him out. The next day, I met with Tom and Karen to go over what we had. Tom was angry, ready to storm into the coffee shop and confront Liam himself. Karen was calmer, laying out the evidence like a puzzle. "The contract's strong, but the emails and recording add context," she said. "If we can find more like the finalized contract or proof they lied to Liam, we've got a shot at proving coercion." I nodded, knowing it was a long road, but I was ready. I asked Tom to keep his ears open, to let me know if he heard anything else at Caldwell events. He agreed, saying he'd stick close to Liam. I kept up my routine at the coffee shop, watching for any chance to talk to Liam. I'd bring him little things, a batch of his favorite oatmeal cookies, a scarf when the weather turned cold. He'd thank me, but his smiles were thin, like he was carrying something heavy. One day, I asked about a new sign outside the shop, trying to keep it casual. He said Martha's idea. Her dad thought it'd draw more customers. His voice had an edge, like he was tired of hearing her dad's name. I filed that away, knowing every bit of frustration was a step closer to the truth. Then Jake called again. His contact had found another email, this one from Richard to Martha, talking about a contingency plan if Liam resisted the contract. It was vague, but damning. Richard wrote, "We need him locked in before he starts asking questions." Jake sent it over, and I added it to my folder. I was building a case piece by piece, and it felt like I was finally gaining ground. I called Karen, who said we were close, but still needed something concrete, like the signed contract, or a witness who'd heard the Caldwells admit their plan. I decided it was time to show Liam what I had. I couldn't wait anymore. He was slipping, and the Caldwells were tightening their grip. I invited him to my house for dinner, saying I just wanted to cook for him. He hesitated, but said yes. When he showed up, he looked worn out, but he smiled when he saw the spread. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, just like I used to make when he was a kid. We ate, talked about old times, even laughed a little. It felt like us again just for a moment. Then, after pie, I took a deep breath and said, "Liam, I need to show you something. It's about the business, and it's serious." I pulled out the folder and laid it all out: the contract, the emails, Tom's recording, my notes. I walked him through it slow and clear, watching his face. At first, he was defensive, crossing his arms. "Ma, this is just business stuff. You don't get it." But I kept going, showing him the contract's fine print, the clause that could take Bean and Branch away. I played the recording. Richard's voice cold and smug. The kids locked in now. Liam's jaw tightened. When I showed him the emails, he read them twice, his hands gripping the papers. "They didn't tell me this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They said it was just about the name." I didn't say I told you so. I just sat there letting it sink in. He looked at me, his eyes wet. "Ma, what do I do?" I reached for his hand. "You fight, Liam. You take back what's yours." He nodded, but I could see the fear in him. He wasn't ready to confront Martha. Not yet. But he was starting to see her for what she was. That was enough for now. The next week, Liam started asking questions. He'd call me late at night, telling me about conversations with Martha. He'd asked her about the contract, keeping it casual, but she'd brushed him off, saying it was standard procedure. He didn't buy it. He started checking the business's books, something Martha always handled. He found weird transfers money, going to Caldwell-owned accounts expenses that didn't make sense. He sent me screenshots, his texts, frantic. "Ma, this isn't right." I told him to keep digging to save everything. Martha noticed he was pulling away. She called me one night, her voice like ice. "Janice, you're turning him against me. Stop it or you'll regret it." I laughed, surprising myself. "You're the one lying to him, Martha. He's waking up, and you can't stop that." She hung up, but I knew I'd rattled her. Liam told me she was acting weird, snapping at him, checking his phone, pushing him to sign new papers. He didn't sign, thank God, but he was scared. He'd never seen her like that. I kept pushing too. I met with Tom again, who'd been to another Caldwell event. He said Richard was acting cocky, telling people Liam was fully integrated into the family. Tom recorded a bit more. Nothing as clear as the first time, but enough to show Richard's arrogance. I added it to my folder. I also reached out to Sarah, asking her to talk to Liam, to remind him who he was outside of Martha. She agreed, saying she'd invite him for coffee. Keep it low-key. I didn't know if it'd help, but I was throwing everything I had at this. Liam started opening up more. He'd call me after work, telling me about the pressure Martha's dad, calling him son, the investors watching his every move. One night, he showed up at my house unannounced, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Ma, I found the contract," he said, holding a USB drive. He'd copied it from Martha's laptop when she was out. It was the signed version with the same clause Jake had found, plus new terms giving the Caldwells veto power over major decisions. Liam's voice shook. "They lied to me. This whole time, they lied." I hugged him, feeling his shoulders tremble. "You're not alone, kid. We're gonna fix this." He nodded, but I could tell he was terrified. The Caldwells were powerful, and he was just one guy. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had me, Tom, Karen, and a growing pile of evidence. I knew the fight was about to get uglier, but I was ready. Martha and her family thought they'd won, but they didn't know what a mother would do to protect her son. They were about to find out. Liam was done being Martha's pawn. After finding the signed contract on her laptop, he was furious at her family, at himself, for falling for their lies. He showed up at my house with the USB drive, his hands shaking as he told me about the terms that gave the Caldwells control over Bean and Branch. It wasn't just a business deal, it was a betrayal, and he was ready to fight back. I was proud of him, but I knew this was only the beginning. The Caldwells weren't going to let him walk away without a war, and I was ready to stand by him every step of the way. We had evidence, contracts, emails, recordings, but we needed to move fast before Martha and her dad tightened their grip. Liam started by digging deeper into the business's finances. He'd never looked closely before. Martha always handled the books, saying it was her strength. But now he was suspicious, and he had reason to be. He spent nights at my house hunched over his laptop going through bank statements and invoices. He found more than just the shady transfers to Caldwell accounts. There were payments to vendors that didn't exist, expenses for equipment the shop never bought. He showed me the records, his voice tight with anger. "Ma, they've been skimming money this whole time. This isn't my business. It's their cash machine." I nodded, feeling my own anger rise. The Caldwells hadn't just tricked him, they'd been robbing him blind. We met with Karen, my lawyer friend, to lay out everything. She went through the contract, the emails, the recordings, and Liam's financial findings. Her face was serious, but her eyes lit up. "This is fraud, plain and simple," she said. "The contract's predatory, and the money trail backs it up. We've got a case, but it's not going to be easy. The Caldwells have deep pockets and deeper connections." Liam looked nervous, but he squared his shoulders. "I don't care. I'm not letting them take this from me." I squeezed his hand, proud of the fight in him. Karen agreed to take the case. Pro bono, she believed in us, and hated bullies like the Caldwells. Karen's first move was a letter to Richard Caldwell, demanding they void the contract and return Liam's share of Bean and Branch. It was a shot across the bow. Not something we expected them to agree to, but it put them on notice. We also started preparing for a lawsuit, knowing the Caldwells wouldn't back down. Karen warned us it could get ugly legal fees, public scrutiny, maybe even personal attacks. I told her I'd sell my car, my jewelry, whatever it took. Liam said he'd pick up extra work to help. We were in this together, and that gave me strength I hadn't felt in months. Liam decided he needed to confront Martha face to face. He wanted answers, and he wanted her to know he wasn't her puppet anymore. He asked me to be there, not in the room, but close, in case things went south. We set it up for after hours at Bean and Branch, when the shop was dark and quiet. I waited outside, parked across the street, watching through the big front window. Liam sat at a table, the contract in front of him, his face set like stone. Martha walked in, her arms crossed, looking annoyed. I couldn't hear them, but I could see the tension, her leaning forward, pointing at him, her mouth moving fast. Liam didn't flinch. He pointed at the contract, his voice rising, until I caught a few words. "You lied to me, Martha. This stops now." She stood up her chair, scraping, and started pacing. Her face was red, her hands waving as she shouted. Liam stayed calm, laying out the evidence. Probably the transfers, the contract's fine print, maybe even the emails. Martha stopped staring at him, then said something sharp and stormed out. She brushed past my car, without noticing me, her heels clicking fast on the sidewalk. Liam came out a minute later, his face pale, but determined. "She's not backing down," he said, sliding into the passenger seat. "She says her family will bury me." I nodded, gripping the wheel. "Then we bury them first." That night, Liam moved out of their apartment. He showed up at my house with 2 duffel bags and a box of books, looking like a kid coming home from college. I set him up in the spare room, and for the first time in a year, I felt like I had my son back. He wasn't all the way there, still scared, still angry, but he was fighting, and that was enough. We spent hours talking, not just about the business, but about us. He apologized for the name change, for shutting me out. "I thought I was doing the right thing, Ma," he said, his voice low. "I thought it'd make everything work." I hugged him, telling him it wasn't too late to fix it. The Caldwells didn't waste time. A week after Karen's letter, we got a response, not from Richard, but from his lawyer. They'd filed a lawsuit against Liam, claiming he'd breached the contract by undermining the business's leadership. It was a power move meant to scare him into backing off. Karen wasn't fazed. She filed a counterclaim, alleging fraud, coercion, and financial misconduct. She used the contract, the emails, and Liam's bank records to build the case. "This is a fight now," she said. "They're not used to people pushing back." The legal battle took over our lives. Karen worked late nights, filing motions, and digging through Caldwell business records. Liam picked up a part-time job at a hardware store to help with costs, and I sold some old jewelry, rings, and necklaces I hadn't worn in years. It hurt, but it was worth it. We were stretched thin, but we kept going. Liam started sleeping better, eating more like the fog was lifting. He'd tell me about the hardware store, the customers he liked, and it felt like he was finding himself again. Martha didn't let up either. She went public, posting on social media about Liam's betrayal. She called him ungrateful, said he was sabotaging their dream. She posted pictures of herself at Bean and Branch, smiling with customers, captioned with things like, "Building our future, no matter what." It was a performance, and it worked on some people. A few of Liam's friends stopped talking to him, buying her story. He tried to act like it didn't hurt, but I saw it in his face, the way he'd check his phone, hoping for a text that never came. "They'll see the truth." Eventually, I told him. He nodded, but I knew it stung. To fight back, Liam started rebuilding Bean and Branch on his own. He found a small space, a tiny storefront a few miles from the original shop, and rented it with his savings. He set up a single coffee machine, a few tables, and called it Harris Brew. It was a risk, especially with the lawsuit hanging over us, but it was his way of taking back his name, his life. He worked day and night, roasting beans, serving customers, posting about it online. He used his old name, Liam Harris, on everything, and people noticed. Locals started coming in, drawn by the story of a guy fighting for his dream. I helped when I could, bringing him lunch, cleaning tables, even learning to pull espresso shots. Customers loved it, calling me Mama Harris, and asking about Liam's story. He didn't tell them much, just said he was starting fresh. But the word spread, and soon Harris Brew had a small but loyal crowd. It wasn't the fancy setup Martha had, but it was his, and that made it better. Liam started smiling, more joking with customers, looking like the kid I'd raised. The lawsuit kept grinding though. The Caldwell's lawyers dragged things out, filing motions to delay, trying to wear us down. Karen held her ground, but she warned us it could take months, maybe years. Then Jake came through with a game changer. His contact at the law firm leaked more emails, this time between Richard and his lawyer, not Martha. They were blunt, talking about how to neutralize Liam if he fought the contract. One email from Richard said, "If he pushes, we cut him out. The name's ours, and so's the business." It was the clearest proof yet of their intent. Karen pounced on it. She added the emails to our case, filing a motion to escalate the lawsuit. The judge started paying attention, asking the Caldwell's lawyers hard questions at hearings. We could feel the tide turning, but it wasn't over. The Caldwells offered a settlement, $50,000 for Liam, to walk away from Bean and Branch entirely. It was tempting money to pay off the legal fees to start over, but Liam shut it down. "I'm not giving them my work," he said, his voice firm. "They don't get to win." The final court date was a pressure cooker. Karen had prepped us for weeks, going over every detail. Liam would testify, laying out the whole story, the name change, the contract, the lies. I'd be a witness too, talking about how the Caldwells tried to cut me out of Liam's life. The courtroom was packed mostly with Caldwell allies, Martha, her dad, their lawyers, all staring us down. Martha sat in the front row, her face blank, watching Liam like she could intimidate him into silence. Liam took the stand and didn't hold back. He told the judge everything: how Martha pitched the name change as a branding move, how the contract was buried in jargon. He didn't understand how he found the money trail. He showed the emails, played the recording, and read the contract's worst clauses aloud. His voice shook at first, but it got stronger, like he was reclaiming himself with every word. I was so proud I could barely sit still. Martha testified next, and it was a performance. She looked polished, confident, saying Liam had agreed to everything willingly, that he was unstable and trying to sabotage their success. She painted herself as the victim, the hard-working wife betrayed by her husband. But Karen was ready. She cross-examined Martha, picking apart her story, using the emails and bank records to show the Caldwell scheme. Martha stumbled her answers, vague, her face tightening, as the judge's questions got sharper. The evidence was too much. The judge ruled in our favor, voiding the contract and giving Liam full control of Bean and Branch. The Caldwells were ordered to pay damages $200,000, though we knew they'd appeal. Outside the courthouse, Liam hugged me, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Ma. For all of it." I held him tight, my heart full. "You're back, kid. That's enough." We walked away, ignoring Martha's glare, feeling lighter than we had in years. Harris Brew grew after the trial. Customers poured in, drawn by the story of Liam's fight. He hired a couple of baristas, expanded the menu, and started planning a second location. He was Liam Harris again, not just in name, but in spirit. I'd stop by the shop, seeing him laugh with customers, and it felt like a miracle. We'd won, but I knew the Caldwells weren't done. They were too powerful, too stubborn, to let this go. I kept my guard up, waiting for their next move, ready to protect my son, no matter what came next. The courtroom victory felt like a new beginning, but I knew the Caldwells wouldn't go quietly. Liam was back running, Harris Brew smiling again, calling me just to talk. We were closer than we'd been in years, and his little coffee shop was buzzing with customers who loved his story as much as his coffee. I thought we'd turned a corner, that the worst was behind us. But life has a way of throwing curves, and what came next hit us harder than anything Martha or her family had done before. It was a twist that shook us to the core, but it also showed us what we were made of together. Life after the trial settled into a rhythm. Harris Brew was thriving, packed most days with locals who'd heard about Liam's fight. He'd hired 2 baristas to keep up, and he was experimenting with new blends, even talking about a food menu. I'd stop by to help, wiping down tables or chatting with customers who called me Mama Harris. Liam was himself again, joking, planning, full of ideas. He'd changed his name back to Liam Harris legally, and it was like a weight had lifted. One evening, he showed me a framed photo he'd hung behind the counter, him and me at his high school graduation, both of us grinning. "This is home, Ma," he said, and I had to blink back tears. We were still dealing with the lawsuit's fallout. The Caldwells appealed the ruling, dragging things out, but Karen was on it, filing motions to keep the pressure on. The damages, $200,000, were tied up in escrow, and we didn't expect to see a penny anytime soon. Liam didn't care about the money. He just wanted his business free and clear. He kept working, pouring everything into Harris Brew, And I kept supporting him, bringing him dinner, when he worked late, helping with inventory, anything to keep him going. Martha had gone quiet. Her social media was dark, no more posts about Bean and Branch or her perfect life. Liam heard through a friend. She'd moved out of their apartment, maybe to her parents' estate, upstate. I didn't trust the silence. The Caldwells were too calculating to just disappear, and I kept my eyes open, checking Liam's mail for legal notices, watching for any sign they were plotting something new. But for a few months, it was calm, too calm looking back. Then Tom called, his voice shaky. "Janice, you need to see this. It's bad." He sent me a link to a news article, and my stomach dropped as I read it. Richard Caldwell, Martha's dad, had been arrested, not for anything tied to us, but for tax evasion and fraud. The feds had been investigating his businesses for months, and Bean and Branch was named as one of the fronts he'd used to launder money. The article mentioned persons of interest, including Martha, who'd been questioned but not charged. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process it. The Caldwells weren't just manipulative, they were criminals, and Liam had been tangled up in their mess without knowing it. I showed Liam the article that night at my house. He read it slowly, his face going pale. "Ma, I had no idea," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All that money they pumped into the shop. It was dirty." I nodded, watching him carefully. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen. I should have seen it. The investors, the rush to sign contracts, all of it. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You couldn't have known, kid. They played you, played us both." He looked at me, his eyes full of guilt. "What if this comes back on me? What if they think I was part of it?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew we had to act. I called Karen the next morning, and she was already on it, pulling records to make sure Liam was clear. She said the feds might want to talk to him, since he'd been a partner in Bean and Branch during the early days. "He needs to be honest, show he had no knowledge," she said. "Your lawsuit, evidence those emails, the contract, will help prove he was a victim, not a player." Liam agreed to cooperate, but he was scared, and I couldn't blame him. The idea of federal agents digging into his life was enough to rattle anyone. The news spread fast. Reporters started calling, wanting Liam's side of the story. At first, he wanted to stay quiet, to focus on Harris Brew, and move on. But I pushed him to speak out. "You fought for your name, your business," I said. "People need to know why." He thought it over, and agreed, setting up an interview with a local news outlet. He sat down with a reporter at Harris Brew, the framed photo of us in the background, and told the whole story: the name change, Martha's lies, the contract, the lawsuit. He didn't hold back, calling the Caldwells out for using him, for trying to erase his identity. He mentioned me, saying, "My mom never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." I watched the interview online, my chest tight with pride. The story went viral. People shared it on social media, calling Liam an inspiration, a guy who'd taken on a powerful family and won. Harris Brew got a flood of new customers, some driving hours, just to shake his hand. He handled it well, staying humble, but I could see it meant something to him. He started getting emails from other young business owners, asking for advice on protecting their work. He'd spend evenings replying, sharing what he'd learned about contracts and trust. It was like he'd found a new purpose, not just running a coffee shop, but helping others avoid what he'd been through. The Caldwells' empire kept crumbling. More arrests followed: Richard's brother, a cousin, even one of their accountants. The feds seized assets, including the upstate estate. Martha's name stayed in the news, but she was gone. No posts, no sightings, nothing. Tom heard from a mutual friend she'd left the country, maybe to avoid questioning. I didn't care where she was, as long as she was out of Liam's life. But I kept the articles, the court filings, everything in case she came back. I wasn't taking chances. Liam's cooperation with the feds went smoothly. He met with agents twice, showing them the lawsuit evidence and explaining how Martha and her dad had controlled Bean and Branch. Karen was there, making sure he was protected. The agents were satisfied. Liam's name was clear, and the evidence pointed to the Caldwells alone. He came home from the second meeting, looking lighter, like he'd shed the last of Martha's shadow. "It's over, Ma," he said, hugging me. "I'm free." Harris Brew kept growing. Liam added a second location, a small kiosk at a farmer's market, and it took off. He hired another barista, and started training his staff to roast beans, building a team he trusted. He was careful now, checking every contract, questioning every deal. He'd learned the hard way, but it made him stronger. Customers loved him, not just for the coffee, but for his story. They'd leave notes on receipts, saying things like, "Keep fighting Liam," or "Proud of you, Harris." He'd pin them on a corkboard, behind the counter, right next to our photo. One day, he called me to the shop for a surprise. He'd found his original birth certificate, the one I'd sent him with my note. I raised a son, not a brand. He'd tucked it away in a box during the move, forgotten until he was cleaning out his old apartment. He'd framed it, the certificate, and my note side by side, and hung it above the espresso machine. "This is who I am, Ma," he said, pointing at the frame. "Liam Harris, because of you." I hugged him, my throat tight. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was us. Our fight, our victory. The Caldwell's legal troubles kept making headlines. Richard was convicted, sentenced to 7 years. The feds dismantled his businesses, and Bean and Branch closed for good. Its signage gone, its windows boarded up. I drove by once just to see it, and felt nothing but relief. Liam didn't need that place anymore. He'd built something better. The damages from our lawsuit finally came through $150,000 after the appeal failed. Liam used it to pay off debts, expand Harris Brew, and put some in savings. He tried to give me half, but I refused. "This is yours, kid," I said. "Build your future." Looking back, the fight wasn't just about a name. It was about love, about holding on when everything's pulling you apart. I lost Liam for a while, caught in Martha's world, but I got him back stronger, wiser, more himself than ever. I learned something too. A mother's love can outlast any lie, any empire. We're still building Liam with his shops, me with my pride in him. There are days I worry the Caldwells might resurface, but I'm not afraid anymore. We faced them once and won. We'd do it again if we had to. Liam started mentoring other entrepreneurs, hosting workshops at Harris Brew. He'd talk about contracts, trust, and standing up for yourself. People came from all over filling the shop, taking notes. He'd point to the framed birth certificate and say, "Your name's your story. Don't let anyone take it." I'd watch from the back, seeing the man he'd become, and know every second of the fight was worth it. We weren't just a family. We were a team unbreakable, and that's how we'd stay. If this story hit you, check out the next one on your screen. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for being here.